Welcome to JFF Horizons Summit. Please welcome President and CEO of JFF, Maria Flynn.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. How is everybody? Good? Good. Well, it is so great to see all of you here and to be together in New Orleans once again. It's hard to believe that the last time we were here was in June of 2018. And I know, at least for me, that seems like a lifetime ago. And I am just thrilled to be out of my little Zoom box and back here in person with all of you. So I would love for us to get started just by taking advantage of having this human connection. And I would love everyone just to stand and introduce yourself to someone near you who you don't know, just who you are and why you're here, and we'll just take a minute to start to get to know each other. All right, now I'm going to try to get you to sit back down. All right, everybody, we're going to get back on track now that I've completely lost control of the meeting, 1 minute in. So I love the energy, and I hope that we do a lot more of this connecting over the next 2 days. So we really intentionally design Horizons to be a big tent. And with us in the room today are corporate and nonprofit leaders, technologists and policymakers, and college presidents. We have philanthropists and investors, and most importantly, we have the workers and the learners who are the real reason why all of us do this collective work. Every single person in the room today, including all the people still in line to get the registration badges, have such a critical role to play in our shared objective in achieving equitable economic advancement for all. And we're here at a critical time. And this is urgency around this event because this is such a critical moment for our country. And there are 4 forces that have converged that make it so critical. The first, we continue to be in the midst of an enduring pandemic, a pandemic that has caused so many of us to lose loved ones and to make significant structural changes in how we live our lives. One lasting impact of the pandemic is our relationship to work. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 47 million Americans voluntarily left their jobs last year. This morning, you're going to hear from Joe Fuller, who's a professor at Harvard Business School. And Joe argues that this is actually a long-term trend that's been made worse by the pandemic. And the trends for women are particularly concerning. 1 in 3 women say that they have considered downshifting their careers or leaving the workforce entirely this year. The pandemic has also intensified economic volatility, which is our second factor. Shortly after the pandemic hit, we saw historically high unemployment rates, and now that has flipped. According to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, there are twice the number of open jobs as unemployed workers in this country. And to put that a different way, that means if every unemployed worker were to secure a job, there would still be 5 million job openings across the U.S. And as we all know, this isn't just about labor shortages. There are supply shortages that are fueling inflation and are dragging down the economy, right? We feel that every time we go and fill our car up with gas. And we're living in a time of extreme uncertainty, and that uncertainty creates anxiety in the job market. The third factor is that, unfortunately, so far, Washington isn't really helping. And we're approaching a midterm election that has the potential to intensify the partisan divides that create such gridlock in DC. Gun violence is just the latest example. I think that we really have to question our values as a country if we can't make changes to the laws that could make Americans safer at school, at church, and in the grocery store. And this gridlock, it extends to the issues that we all work on, education and workforce. While we've seen progress in legislative action around increases in infrastructure funding and funding for COVID relief, we have yet to see increases in funding for skills development and workforce development. But I'm just thrilled that we have leaders here with us from both the executive branch and the legislative branch of the government, and staff from both sides of the aisle who are committed to progress and reform. Finally, we continue to feel the devastating impacts that structural racism has on our systems and our communities. As my JFF colleague Michael Collins has written, for Black learners and workers, that means gaps in income, in employment, in advancement, and in wealth. Researchers estimate that ongoing racial discrimination has caused the United States between $16 and $23 trillion over the past 20 years because of lower growth, lower productivity, and less innovation. So these problems can seem insurmountable, especially when all four of these forces, an enduring pandemic, volatile economy, partisan divides, and structural racism, are forces that all of us can't ignore in our work to improve learning and work in this country. And I think if we're really honest, we can admit that today's systems aren't working and that the problems are getting worse instead of better. And so we need to work together to think and act differently. So this is why there's an urgency around this convening this year. It's such a critical moment. And this is a moment that can feel quite heavy, right? It's like, wow. And it kind of makes us want to throw in the towel and maybe head on over to Bourbon Street and leave this for somebody else to figure out. But that's not what we're going to do. Because my hope is that over the next 2 days, we can release ourselves from the heavy and really lean into a mindset of creativity and innovation for forward momentum. Because we need to embrace new ways of thinking, better ways of operating, and different ways of collaborating. The good news is that so many of you in this room are already doing just that. And that's why we bring together the dreamers and the doers to be part of the spark and the energy that we're here at the conference to create. And that spark and energy, that's the intent of Horizons. So let's leverage the frustration and the uncertainty that we're feeling to drive our desire for a better future. And let me propose a 3-part framework to help guide our thinking as we do that. The first is people. We have to build solutions that are centered around the assets and the needs of workers and learners. Now that may sound pretty obvious, but unfortunately, too often solutions are centered around politics and legacy thinking and legacy systems. And as some of you know, before I was at JFF, I used to work at the US Department of Labor, focused on issues of the public workforce system and really immersed in the details of workforce boards and American job centers. And in my opinion, much of the lack of true reform in that system stems from age-old debates over governance and political control. How geographic boundaries of local areas are drawn and who gets to have seats on the boards, and too many tugs of war between governors and local elected officials, and not enough focus on what makes sense for workers. And sadly, I think the same could be said for too many of our public systems. So I'll share an encouraging example of a different approach. I think we can all agree that the US needs many, many more high-quality jobs. However, worker voices are rarely included in the search for solutions. At JFF, we partner with a worker-owned cooperative called Turning Basin Labs. They're based out in Oakland. And we work with them to chart a new path to high-quality job creation that includes worker voices in the search for solutions. To get new insights, we engage workers as leaders, as researchers and advisors, and the workers are at the center of that research, tapping into their lived experiences. In addition to putting workers at the center of solution development, we also need to continue to build people-centered approaches to talent development. As my friend Byron Aguis would say, raw talent is everywhere. So how do we match that talent with opportunity? Byron's going to be joining me here on stage at lunch today, so we'll hear more from him then. And how do we build equitable opportunities for workers and learners? To me, one of the most important things we can do is to build universal tools that provide them with the information they need to make informed decisions about education and career opportunities. We also need the technical and the human infrastructure that supports lifelong learning. And we've got many entrepreneurs here in the audience who are working to tackle that issue. For example, we have Fernando Rodriguez Villa. Fernando is the CEO of Adept ID, which is a startup based up in Boston. Fernando and his team are working to build a platform that can help identify transferable skills and traits to recommend individuals to on-demand jobs and the training they need to get there. The next part of the framework is place. So back again, when I was at the US Department of Labor, I kind of learned the hard way that provisions that sounded great inside the Beltway could easily have inadvertent effects when moved from policy to action. And there's one example that I'll never forget. So I was working with folks from several federal agencies in the Office of Management and Budget, and our task was to develop guidance around cost allocation. And the intent of this guidance was to help streamline service delivery across federal programs within the American Job Centers. And when we were done, my colleagues and I felt great. We thought we had solved this huge problem. And that feeling ended when I heard from a number of local officials who said, you know what, that guidance really isn't helpful at all. And in fact, it was impeding what they were trying to advance at the local level. In hindsight, my colleagues and I, had lost sight of the fact that solutions need to touch down in a community. We need solutions that respond to community needs and make sense to the learners and workers who reside there. Even in this era of growing virtual and hybrid work opportunities, place matters. And one size just isn't going to fit all. We have amazing community leaders here with us who are leading those kinds of efforts. We have folks from Philadelphia Work and Youth Force NOLA and many others. The last piece of the framework is possibilities. Before the pandemic, we had speakers, probably like me, at events, probably like this, who would talk about the future of work and the rapid pace of change. But who would have guessed the amount of change that was waiting for us right around the corner? As Andrew Yang said at our virtual Horizons in June of 2020, we saw 10 years of change in 10 weeks. And we all witnessed how quickly we can adapt. In an astonishing short amount of time, we all learned how to lead and to contribute from our kitchen tables, all while we were helping our young ones adapt to virtual learning. We also saw great examples of incumbent systems and programs adapt. One of the programs that JFF highlighted early in the pandemic is based right here in New Orleans, Cafe Reconcile. Cafe Reconcile is an organization whose core training is centered on the culinary industry. But as restaurants struggled to regain their footing during the pandemic, Cafe Reconcile created new occupational pathways. They worked with employer partners in a variety of industries to identify skills that can transfer from the restaurant business to other sectors. And they've continued to evolve their offerings as partnerships and the economy have recovered. We've also seen new entrants design solutions to meet the challenges of the moment. For example, Anthill is here with us. They are designing a solution to help connect, engage, and grow their workers who do not sit at a desk or at a computer, the deskless workforce, as they call it. So many times, incumbents and new entrants each believe they have all the answers. But I'm a deep believer that new approaches, the ones that we really need, engage the best of both of those worlds, incumbent systems and new entrants, through what we can think of as a dual transformation approach. So that approach acknowledges that neither side has all the answers. And so in this model, which is actually something JFF uses both to guide our internal change efforts as well as our external facing work, two transformations are pursued at the same time. One is to improve current and existing systems. The second is to foster innovation for future growth. And at JFF, we've worked to build connections and partnerships between system leaders and entrepreneurs. One of the earliest examples we have of that was with community colleges, such as Lorain County Community College, and I know we have Marcia Ballinger, their president, here with us today. We worked to partner them with Persistence Plus, which is a text-based nudging app that encourages students to complete their coursework and to continue their education. And through this work over the past 5 years, we've been able to learn under what conditions nudging works best. So in that vein, let's work together to leverage the best of the current reality while also actively building the future. So as we convene over the next 2 days, let's keep a few things in mind. The status quo is not okay. Our workers and learners deserve better. And we need to challenge our assumptions of what's possible. In order to meet the challenges that are ahead, we need to embrace new ways of thinking, new ways of operating, and new ways of collaborating. So let's give ourselves permission to think big, to see beyond our inboxes and the crisis of today, to see beyond our biases and the boxes that we put ourselves in, to see beyond all the small ball and the incremental change that is just going to leave us facing these identical challenges a generation from now. So let's dream big, let's be bold, and let's take big swings together. So I hope you'll join me as we step back to see beyond.
Look around at the signals of what's going on in the world. What is your vision of the future? Are you scared of the future? I am Jewish, Ukrainian, Black, Native American. My peoples have been through multiple apocalypses, and we've come through the other side to try to think more imaginatively about our collective survival and our ability to thrive in the future too. I think our minds in the future will really take some of the most compelling aspects of virtual reality, augmented reality, and create not only a metaverse, but what I like to call a pluriverse, where we can have multiple expressions of our imaginations reflected in these different modalities, so that students will learn by projecting a model of the Earth right in front of us as we're talking about it, spin it around with their hands to look at a particular space and time and immerse themselves in it. So it's this journey of going from the metaverse to the pluriverse, where we can have multiple voices thrive. The intent is to heal ourselves and to heal each other. "40,000 years ago, in the caves of Lascaux in France, they've created this miraculous imagery. These people had the same biological and mental capacity that we do now. We're really used to creating and adapting ourselves with our tools to think about alternative visions of the future. And I think tool making and shared collective creation is part of our makeup as human beings. Work may become more automated, but then it frees people up to create more goods and services in different ways that unleashes maybe a multi-trillion economy that we can't even imagine. Maybe it's the imagination economy rather than the survival economy. How do we imagine our own roles in the future and have a collective literacy around the future of work? In 1900, the average lifespan was about 40 years old. Now, it's 80. What if we doubled that lifespan? And what if we even lived 1,000 years? What would that mean? It would also reconceive our idea of what it would mean for living a human life and how we can have multiple identities in a pluriverse across a lifespan of 1,000 years. What could I do with that time? What I see is a collective inclusion and acknowledgement of people's past and full humanity, So the idea of creating a healing economy, an imagination economy, a place of social well-being and social justice is part of our new working future.